have come here to chew bubble gum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubble.
I got a show for you tonight. Wow, we are going to have Dan the Man Butcher, and from High Plains Pundit, All Things Media, and gosh, I wonder what we're going to talk about tonight. Then after that, we've got the unpleasant blind guy who isn't. Oh, he's blind, but he's not unpleasant. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon. You got a belly up to the bar, we've kept your seat, and it's great to see you back. Tonight, Angel's gonna be a bartendress. She pours with the best of them. The lava lamp is lighted to my left, your right. We don't water our drinks just like we don't water our conversation. Politics, religion, crime, culture, economics, race, sex, science, law. We talk about it all here at the Saloon. Because nothing is sacred. Absolutely nothing at all. And all we ask is that you flush the toilet, jiggle the handle, and don't forget to tip your waitress. That's very important. Now, I told you that we're going to have two very special guests on tonight, and one is here immediately. And I can't wait, because I'm sure that probably like me, there's a particular topic that we might talk about tonight. So welcome, welcome, welcome to Dan Butcher, the High Plains Pundit. Dan, welcome. Uh-oh. Dan, call back. It went away. I had the phone. Dan, call back. In any event, while we wait for Dan, I have to tell you one very important thing. After looking at, watching all the things that occurred this past weekend, Saturday, Sunday, some of the things that occurred on Monday, let's try this again. Dan, sir, are you there?
I can hear you this time, BZ. What's going on, my friend?
It is great to hear you. Wonderful to hear you. What I was saying is, and we're going to get to our big topic, I'm sure, very soon. But what I was starting to say is that I really have an appreciation today of what you and I are doing right now after watching what crap occurred this past weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and yesterday, Monday, because I'm going to do what I call the logical extension, because I'm sure, like you, I see where this is going. So rather than waiting for anything in particular, Dan, what did you happen to think about all that incredible nastiness in Charlottesville this Saturday?
Oh, where do you start with this, DC?
You're right.
Here's what ended up happening. First of all, you had a bunch of, let's just call them what they are. You had a bunch of racist organizations that went to Charlottesville, got together. They had a permit. They went through the legal process.
Yes.
They got a permit to hold their little gathering, to do their march. And in response, We had a bunch of the radical leftists known as Antifa show up. You also had a good mixture of with Antifa. You also had you had the white supremacists, you had the KKK, you had the neo-Nazis, the skidheads on one side. On the other side, you had Antifa, you had the new Black Panthers, you had La Raza, you name it, you had it on the other side. And so there was just a mixture. You knew this thing was going to blow up at some point. And let's face it, we'll just for sake, we'll call them the white supremacist, just to keep everybody clear on which side we're talking about. They're both bad guys, so we'll talk about it. The white supremacists on their side of the aisle, you know what? They showed up anticipating that there might be a fight. And of course, the leftist radicals showed up more than willing to give them a fight. And then, of course, they clashed. When Governor Terry McAuliffe gave the order to disperse the gathering because he was scared something was going to happen, well, something happened. And these two sides met, and we had the explosion between the two. Unfortunately, we did have a gentleman get in an automobile and take out a bunch of other folks, killing a young lady in the process. But bottom line is, these were two. What you got to see in Charlottesville was the extreme on both sides of the aisle. I think many people that have listened to me on my own program, if you have read, my websites going back several years now, where I stand on this. There are extreme elements on both sides of the aisle, and you got to see them both on full display this past weekend. And I personally think they were both itching for a fight. And I'll tell you what, now the Antifa folks, when they show up and they start pulling the radical elements and start terrorizing and start doing the nonsense they usually do with the destruction of property, attacking people, they usually don't get met with resistance, but they got met with some resistance from some just equally bad guys, in my opinion. So you saw the explosion all the way around. I actually thought that, personally, I thought Donald Trump's initial response was, hey, you know what? We got a bunch of bad guys on both sides of the aisle. That was the initial response. Hey, we got a bunch of bad folks that met up in Charlottesville, and we cannot, it's time to do something about all of this on both sides. And then, of course, I think he got pressured politically into calling out the white supremacists, the KKK, the neo-Nazis, specifically by name. I think he got politically pressured with that. But I think today, in his news conference that he had today, he came out and called out the radical leftists as well. These are anarchists, folks. You're talking about with Antifa, the new Black Panthers, Black Lives Matter, La Raza, CARE. I'm going to lump all of these together. You're talking about folks that are calling for the overthrow of the government. They're calling for the Constitution of the United States to be torn up and thrown in the trash can. That's the type of radical element that we're dealing with there. But I think he had a great response today as far as calling out both sides of the aisle and pointing out, and I think that was really missed in a lot of the news coverage today, because people, the legacy media, the liberal media, progressive media, whatever you want to call them, they latched on to the white supremacist. They latched on to the neo-Nazis. They latched on trying to make President Donald Trump look like a racist. That was their go. Let's be honest about this. The New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, ABC News, CBS News, their ultimate goal was not to look at what is causing this, what is causing the rise of these radical elements. And I will, and I've taken some heat because I said there is no difference between the white supremacist, whether it be the KKK, whether it be the neo-Nazis, whether it be Antifa, whether it be Black Lives Matter, Calypso Louie and the Nation of Islam, La Raza, the list just keeps going on. There's no difference between these. They're all racist organizations. They're all radical organizations. They're all very violent organizations. Okay, there's no difference between them, and so. But it just really got under my skin. Really got under my skin when they started trying to lump out the President of the United States to be a racist. And that could be the furthest from the truth when you look at his actual response. And they were trying to put words into his mouth and trying to make, I'm not going to say that they were trying to facilitate fake news, but they were certainly trying to dig around, just like with the Russian collusion story. They're digging around, trying to find something there, trying to make a connection, but there's not. And so, once again, instead of investigating and looking at the true nature of the story, as far as all of these violent organizations, and this is something that's very, very, very telling that's taking place in our country today. We had a lot of violent activity during the 1960s that took place during the Civil Rights Movement. This kind of has a different tone to it because during the 1960s. There wasn't, you might have had some elements in there saying, hey, maybe let's, overthrow the government. We want to change the government was the tone. We want to change things. The tone with these folks is we want to overthrow the United States government. We want to throw away the Constitution of the United States. We want to make this a radical, these folks think that Venezuela is a good example of how to run a country. They think Cuba is a great example of health care and a great way to run a country. That's what they're trying to make, these groups. This is what their end goal is. And that is what their vision is. And it goes, there's such an underlying thing in going away from the racism aspect of all of this. The underlying tone is how violent these demonstrations are and how dangerous these organizations really are, and you're not getting that. And I'm going to use the BBC as an example here in a minute on something, but you're not getting that in the legacy media and the liberal media. You are getting it if you're reading reports, from like my website where we reported on Antifa attacking the Seattle police over the weekend during a demonstration. We reported on Antifa attacking a CBS photojournalist. You'd think that would really get the media pissed off that one of their own was attacked by this group. So, but that brings me to the BBC. The BBC actually ran an article today, pointing out, hey, you know what? You guys are concentrating on all of this, all trying to tie Donald Trump to being a racist or something. What about Antifa? Have you guys not noticed how dangerous this leftist organization is? Yes, the BBC runs an article on how dangerous and about the rise of Antifa in the United States of America, BZ.
First of all, I have to thank everybody in chat because we got a ton of people there, and my mother always taught me be complimentary and considerate. So thanks for you being in chat, Dan, Jersey Joe, we got Mike, we got Whiskey Dale, we got Melanie, thank you, got Mary Brockman, and Dave Miller. Now, when I'm doing that, Melanie made an interesting point in chat. It's greatly about perception, and you can't get away from perception. And I think she's speaking to the initial address that Trump made. You also indicated that Trump isn't a racist. If Trump were an out-and-out racist, I think you would have heard about it by now from all the people that have contacted him over the years. However, Melanie points out what I would translate as, this is a learning tool. It's time to learn a lesson. See what happened and then respond appropriately. Now it's a time to learn politically. But these events are going somewhere. Race is an aspect. Violence
Right.
is an aspect. But it's a continuing aspect that's emboldened and tacitly condoned by a series of individuals.
Yes.
I can't. Maybe it's too early to go to this. I know we got to get out of here about about 8:40 my time, and I was going to kind of hold on to this a little bit. What the hell? I'll just go here right now. I can't tell you how incredibly disappointed I am at American law enforcement. The politicization of law enforcement these days is enough to make me vomit. Now, you cannot tell me, folks, because if you do, I'll say it to your face, it's bullshit. I know how this stuff works. You cannot tell me that Charlottesville did not know what was going to happen. You also cannot tell me that the mayor of Charlottesville, all up to the governor, did not know what's going to happen because phone calls were made. Charlottesville, they had the helicopter that fell, the two officers that were killed in that helicopter were from the Virginia State Police. That tells me one very important thing. They knew what was going to happen. They all talk to each other. So they allowed, look at the videos. There isn't almost one person who isn't pre-armed with something in their hands. Sticks. One dude had essentially a flamethrower. Flags,
Yes.
sticks, things to hit other people with. It all got brought with them. Helmets. You're seeing people that are armed to the teeth, minus handguns, almost as armed up as officers. And just like Berkeley, Charlottesville knew this was going to happen. The Virginia State Police knew this was going to happen. And in some instances from the videos that I watched, they pushed these two elements towards each other. That's disgusting. That's reprehensible. And no matter how they bleat about, well, we can't get involved, fuck you. I know how this stuff works. I know how professional law enforcement people handle things like this. I lived through riots in the 70s. That was an incredibly tumultuous times. I stood in a field in California while I got thrown rocks and bottles. When I went to that, we had no shields. We didn't have half the equipment. The only thing I was wearing at the time when I got hit by rocks and bottles and stuff in these fields was I was smart enough to wear an athlete's cup before I went out there. But you can't convince me these people didn't know what was happening. And then for the mayor to say, oh, I didn't. Why did you even issue the permit? Why did you do that? They all knew what was going to happen. And you're a fucking moron if you couldn't see it. I can only conclude they allowed this to occur in one word: purposefully.
Let me address something here, BZ, and I want to address Donald Trump and perception real quick, and then I want to give you two examples of two different situations this past weekend and how they were handled. Number one, Donald Trump, and you can certainly see this from the response on Saturday versus the response you saw today.
Yes.
Donald Trump is a very quick learner politically, and even when they make a mistake, they seem to be able to learn from it, and they seem to be able to use it to their advantage politically. So look for Donald Trump to kind of, and the Trump administration, especially with Kelly now as the chief of staff and having such a big influence in what's going on in the White House, look for them to react to these things a little bit better and learn from a lot of this, because you still have a lot of people there
I believe
that are
it.
not politicians. These were businessmen that were elected first time ever, serving in a public in a public office such as this. This wasn't being the mayor of a small town. You're talking about going straight to the White House. So there is a learning curve, and they do tend to learn very quickly from their mistakes. I want to come to this and two examples of how what was handled in Charlottesville and what was handled in Seattle over the weekend with Antifa, because in Charlottesville, you certainly saw. I mentioned earlier when my initial rant that both of these sides showed up for a fight. Okay, they knew there was going to be a fight, and certainly the radical leftists met their match with the folks with the radicals from the right this time, because they were both armed, they were both ready, and they were both ready to go. They knew that they were going to have some type of major confrontation, and certainly the police knew that in advance. And knew that, and here was the other. There was certainly, you can put your tinfoil hat on. Some people would argue that this was a mistake. I don't know, but
it's no
when
mistake.
The order was given for the white supremacists to disperse from their gathering, from their protest, from their march, whatever you want to call it, they were told to disperse in the direction of, guess where all of the Antifa folks were. And when they were dispersed in that direction,
that was my
point.
point.
It was going to come to a head.
Yes.
And let me do this real quick, BZ. And then the way things were handled when Antifa started acting up in Seattle over this weekend, the Seattle Police Department came out and they didn't take any bullshit from these guys. And to be quite honestly, they fucked a few of them up. Okay, they pulled out the pepper spray. They pulled out the sticks. They did not hesitate to arrest these folks. They did not hesitate to pepper spray them. They did not hesitate to knock them into the ground, to knock them in the head. If they got anywhere near a police officer, they were going down. They didn't let them push them around. They could do the usual yelling and screaming, but if they tried to cross that line, they knocked them back, and they knocked them back and held their ground. And that was the difference between how it was handled in Charlottesville and how it was handled in Seattle over the weekend. Certainly, and I agree with you, something was amiss in Charlottesville as far as the way the state police reacted, the local police reacted, and certainly, the way Terry McAuliffe, the governor reacted. Terry McAuliffe gave the lame excuse, saying, well, the police were outgunned. They were outgunned. They didn't have enough weapons to deal with this crowd. And of course, the state police, the head of the state police and the police chief of Charlottesville says, you know what? The governor's full of shit. We were more than armed and ready to handle this situation. So something is definitely something's not right here, BZ. You're definitely onto that, and we got to dig into this because it looks like these two groups were pushed together, and knowing that even if they weren't pushed together, there was going to be a fight. There was going to be a major confrontation, but yet they were pushed together. And when they pushed them together, it all blew up and ended up with several people getting run over by a car, one person getting killed, and then they're still fighting today. They were still fighting today in front of one of the statues in Charlottesville.
That's the point. That's the point. You just went there, and I'm going to buttress it right now. I could make an excellent argument for the fact that the lack of police intervention, the tacit condemnation of the violence that was exhibited directly in front of their faces, just as with Berkeley PD, because I watched it, just as with the UCD Berkeley police system, because I watched it, I could make an excellent argument that that woman died because of lack of intervention by the police. People are buttressed when they're not pushed back. The top of my blog says, I am pushback because I exist to push back against the American media maggots. There needs to be a line drawn. Yes, both sides of these people were fucktards, and they needed to be dealt with. You do it immediately, however, on both sides. If you know that this is going to happen, why did you issue the permit? Let it go to court. Then, it's an if-then equation. If these people then assemble, it's an unlawful assembly. You can do something about that. In the California Penal Code, you can do something about that. I would wager that in the Virginia Penal Code, you can do something about that. But you have to have the wherewithal to intervene. I can tell you for a fact, phone calls were made in Berkeley on the UCD system and also in the Berkeley PD system from the mayor to both chiefs that you will step back and you will allow this to occur. I would wager that to a degree this was also made on the part of the chief of police and also the sheriff in Durham who allowed the statute to come down. That's another issue that I'll go 210 over 190 about in a second or two. But you get what you allow when you allowed this to occur, and these two forces you know are going to clash, and you have the ability to stop it. You're not doing your job. I can only again conclude that is purposeful because, trust me, all the law enforcement officers there, enamel was flecking off their teeth, waiting to intervene. And someone somewhere told them not to until a particular point. That point was reached when people were killed and 19 people were injured. And that guy needs to hang. That guy needs to go to the gas chamber, or whatever it is that they have in the leftist state of Virginia. Maybe they don't even have that. He's got to pay a terrible penalty for this.
Exactly. You know, and I'm going to tell you this, BZ. Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe has blood on his hands.
He does.
The police chief in Charlottesville has blood on their hands. Because they did not, let's face it, they, for some reason, whether it was out of political correctness, they were told to stand down or what, they did not react properly to this. There's no doubt. The same thing can be said for what happened in Durham. You know, we had the incident where you had the mob show up to pull down the Confederate statue. You know, no police presence whatsoever around this incident. And of course, now after the fact, they end up arresting one 22-year-old college girl in connection with the pulling of that statue down. Hell, there was at least 50 people around the thing pulling it down. No police presence, nobody there to do anything, but yet then the sheriff gives this lame excuse saying, hey, you know what? You know, I was proud of how my deputy showed restraint and how we allowed these people to exercise, these very upset individuals to exercise their freedom of speech, their freedom to assemble, what have you. Well, you know, during their freedom to assemble, destruction of public property. I don't care what your stance are on Confederate symbols. You can argue for, you can argue against them. I personally think that's a local issue that needs to be dealt with locally if they want to have them what they want to do with them. But still, that was destruction of public property. It needed to be stopped before it even started. And then after the fact, we arrest one person that they're going to make the fall guy in this to say, hey, you know what? Look, we're doing something about this statue being destroyed. Well, you know what? They should have done something to begin with to prevent it from happening. And so, but once again, you know, and I will make this argument that a lot of what we're seeing is, you know, political correctness run amok. You're definitely seeing, you know, my personal opinion in Charlottesville, I think they were thinking, hey, you know what? We can make all of these white supremacists, all of these evil racists look bad. You know, they might beat up a few people, and then we can step in and arrest a few people. And that way it'll make them look bad. We can make Donald Trump look like a racist asshole, because we know he's a racist asshole. You know, so that's what we can do with all of this. You know, we can score some political points by letting these white supremacists, letting these Klan members, you know, relive their glory days and beat up a few people. Hey, doesn't that sound like fun? We can go have a beer afterwards, you know, what have you. But it blew up in their face because somebody got killed. And then it blew up in their face when all of a sudden people start realizing, hey, the people everybody that was fighting on this side, every one of them are a bunch of racist, ignorant assholes. They're all a bunch of ignorant, radical, anarchists. So you're kind of seeing it was something that has, in the days to come, I think the fallout of this is the fallout's not going to be on Donald Trump. It's not going to be on the Republican Party. The fallout of this is going to be on the Democrat Party in general, because everybody has to remember the Democrat Party is duly responsible for the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. The Democrat Party is responsible for the rise of Antifa. The Democrat Party is responsible for the rise of Calypso Louie and the Nation of Islam. The Democratic Party is responsible for the rise of the New Black Panthers, for the Raza, you name it. All of these radical groups, they are responsible for, and it's going to come back to get them, and that's why I think a lot of times you see the Democrats, especially, with the removal. I'm going to address the symbols real quick, and I know you want to go to a break.
Yes,
so
I
we
do.
can talk about it when we get back. But real quick, I personally think that one of the main reasons that the Democrats would love to see a lot of these Confederate symbols go away, the statues and stuff like that, because it is a reminder of their own past. And that's something to discuss about too, BZ.
Folks, we're talking to Dan Butcher of High Plains Pundit Media. We're going to take a break. Dan, you opened a door, and when we come back, I'm going to walk right through it, because I'm going to suggest that where people are attempting to make this all about race, and to a great degree it is, there's a lot more to it than that. Folks, please come back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, it's Sean from the Sackheads Radio Show, also one of the owners here at the SHR Media Network. Are you opinionated? Have you ever wanted to do your own show? Have you ever heard somebody like the Sackheads and go, yeah, I could probably do that better? Well, now's your chance. Send me a 5-minute clip at sackheadsradio@gmail.com, and maybe you can be part of the SHR broadcasting team. sackheadsradio@gmail.com.
Times are dark. The people are misled by corrupt politicians, lied to by establishment media, and deceived by the false messages of Islam. A nation looking for direction needs a guide. It needs a man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker, SHR Media, Pundit Press Radio, and YouTube through the SHR Media page for a different kind of commentary on the unpleasant blind guy. Because the truth is not always pleasant.
Hey, this is Mim from Freedom Fest, the world's largest gathering of free minds. Join your friends from SHR Media at the beautiful Paris Resort in Las Vegas, Nevada, July 19th through the 22nd for 3 amazing days of liberty-oriented discussion, investment advice, and the Anthem Film Festival. It's our big 10th anniversary, featuring keynote speaker William Shatner and Freedom Fest favorites, including Steve Forbes, Jim Rogers, Lee Edwards, David Boaz, Doug Casey, Dinesh D'Souza, John Stossel, Lisa Kennedy, Grover Norquist, Peter Schiff, and many more. Don't miss out. Register at freedomfest.com for $100 off the regular registration rate when you use the all-caps code SHR Media.
Featuring right thinking from a left brain and doing the job the American maggots won't. BZ is fundamentally changing America one diaper at a time. Just when safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, where the speech is free, but the drinks are not. The Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night, commencing at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific, where pushback is a requisite art form in and of itself. Let your ossicles be truly liberated when you listen to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, only on SHR Media Network. No ferrets were harmed in the making of this ad.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show here on the SHR Media Network, and also broadcast on this man's media network as well. We're talking to Dan Butcher of High Plains Pundit fame, and of course we were discussing Charlottesville. Dan, you opened up a door. I'm going to go ahead and walk on through. What occurred this weekend was at the behest of two, I would consider, almost equal factions. And a lot of people are pointing to the race aspect of it. And yes, of course, immediately it was an aspect of that. But it goes further. It goes further into our rights. It goes further into the eroding of authority, and it goes into the eroding of now even law enforcement. Even law enforcement in this nation is, here's a perfect example. You mentioned this before the break as well. There's the sheriff in Durham County, North Carolina. The guy's name is Mike Andrews, and his deputies allowed protesters to pull down this particular statue. Yes, it is Confederate related, but in a way, that's not even the point. That's not the point of it at all. The point is, this sheriff had the temerity to say, and I wrote it down because it was so absolutely baboonish. It was nonsensical. He said, statutes can be replaced, but lives cannot. Really? Really? You're going to go there, Sheriff, and say that? Well, what about this? There was another comparison made earlier. Let's say, basically what this does is this translates to open season on anyone or anything that Antifa sets its sights on. For example, what if the fire department came to your house, which is burning, or your apartment, your condo, your office, and you said, well, we're just going to let your home burn, because otherwise firefighters would be jeopardized, and maybe some citizens too. So once we let it burn down, and then we know that it's safe enough for the firefighters to go in and enter, and nothing bad will happen to them, and of course we'll cordon it off so the citizens don't get their hands burned either, then we'll go and later we'll determine the cause of that particular fire. You'd want fire departments to do that, wouldn't you? Well, okay. I guess, Dan, call back. And in any event, that's an absolute non-starter. What the hell is anyone thinking about that? Let's even go to the start. And like I said, this isn't about the Confederacy or about the Civil War. It goes beyond that. Yes, that is the immediate take that everyone is getting, because that's the point around which all of this was rallied. But the leftists that came in response to this, and again I go back to, you knew what was coming, you saw it, you marked it, you planned it, you plotted it, because I know that every law enforcement agency, and especially in a state like Virginia, they all network together, just like law enforcement on the left coast does. They all network together. So you're going to tell me that they didn't know that this was coming. And despite knowing all of this, no one in the city of Charlottesville, including the police chief, decided to maybe call the mayor and say, unless we get a handle on this early, there are going to be some problems. Because guess what? They already knew that there was going, and if anyone tells you that they didn't know, they're full of crap. They knew precisely what was going to happen and who was going to respond. It's like throwing out popcorn in a park for pigeons. The pigeons are gonna come. It's like seagulls coming. When you throw party mix, you're gonna get these people in a response situation like this. Guaranteed. Here's the other aspect of it. Antifa showed up because all these white supremacists, etc., showed up They were going to conduct a protest because they didn't want Confederate statues taken down. So because they wanted to protest, they decided that they were going to get a permit, and they were going to attack that particular angle lawfully. Okay, we can still protest in this nation. When it migrates over into violence, of course, that's when any logical thinking human being says, wait, that's enough. That's not going to happen. We can't go there. We can't allow it to go there. But they allowed it to go there. Do you possibly think, ladies and gentlemen, that any of these Antifa people who are anarchists, out-and-out anarchists and rioters, do you think any of them have the first clue who Stonewall Jackson is? Do you think any of them have the first clue who Robert E. Lee was, or any of the other names that were on those statues? I'll wager that there's a certain percentile of people there who couldn't even tell you what the Civil War was, when it occurred, why it occurred, and who was on what side. I'll wager that's very true as well. But these people are like ants showing up. Now, you could have issued the permit. You could have decided not to issue the permit. If you had decided to deny the permit, then you likely would have gone to court. And that would have taken a while. Now, here's an interesting aspect. They first, I can't even think of the guy's name, and he's not even worth mentioning because it's not about him. Some guy goes into City Hall and gets a permit for this, then, but only upon reconsideration for whatever reason, the permit gets pulled. He goes to court, a judge examines that, and says, you have a right to free speech. I'm going to reinstate the permit. That's why they began their march. As they marched, Antifa was there to meet them. The elements of law enforcement and the elements in the mayor's office and the city government and the state government as well knew what was happening, knew what was going to happen. I can tell you with all authority, these people talk to each other and they communicate. So this is at its face, at first blush, yes, it's all about race. And it's all about these assholes on the left and these assholes on the right. And basically, they're all identity politics involved. The white supremacists, the alt-right, the anarchists, Antifa, the alt-left. And you cannot see that these people are going to clash. This is all about, on the left, trust me, because the guys on the white supremacist side, they don't have the brain power to do the logical extension. And that's this. This is about delegitimizing the U.S. government. Because, trust me, these people are all organized. They know what they're doing. They're using Cloward Piven against the United States and against you and me. They're using Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals against you and me. It's about delegitimizing the government, the traditions of American society, because leftists, Antifa, anarchists, they don't believe in them. They don't believe in them at all. So the people who want to and are placating the protesters don't understand the statues, at least for Antifa. They're not the point. The white supremacists, their goals are limited in nature because I truly think they can't think ahead. And it's just as well. They're a bunch of goons. Take it on good faith. The people on the left, the alt-left, they're looking much further down the road. And when you placate these protesters, you're becoming an enabler to enable them to acquire their goal of shutting down everything that they don't care for. And this is about a small but incredibly vocal and growing minority, an aspect of U.S. society, totally attempting, just like Obama said, totally attempting to fundamentally change America and reshape not only its future, but they want to eliminate its past as well. These people are no better than ISIS or the other ISIS-linked elements in the Middle East who are doing nothing but blowing up history because they couldn't give a crap about it. It's as simple as that. Or actually, to be truthful, it's much more devious than that. But also, again, you have to do the logical extension. Hey, okay, maybe we will do the logical extension because there's a second phone call coming in. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that is our good friend, Dave Milner. And is that you, Dave?
That is me, Dave.
First off, I got to say, I wonder where the hell Dan went. Or maybe he just, I don't know, maybe he had to go to the bathroom really quickly. But anyway, it was great to hear Dan. And now we're here to speak to you. And first, if you can, tell me what's been going on. Folks, Dave Milner is the unpleasant blind guy. And let me start at the start. Dave, tell everybody where you can be found, where you can be read, and most importantly, because we're transitioning over to another general topic, tell people about EDL.
Wow. Well, you can hear me at Spreaker.com under the Unpleasant Blind Guy, and that's under the SHR Media page, of course. And you can. I also have a YouTube page that you can subscribe to, the Unpleasant Blind Guy. And sometimes if you subscribe to that, sometimes you get the shows a little earlier. And I'm also heard on the High Plains pundit, High Plains, talk radio. Excuse me, been up a while. And some of my longer shows are heard on the Western Free Radio Network. So there's that. And it's interesting that you asked me about the EDL because as these events were happening in Charlottesville, I was talking to Jeff Mitchell, who's the host of the English Defense League radio program, and I'll get into what EDL is for those who don't know in a moment. And he was saying that this is exactly the sort of thing that we've been warning people about for years when we come to the United States. And it's just a shame that he can't be here because it's almost 5 o'clock in his morning now. So, it's sad that he can't be with us. But at any rate, the English Defense League started out in about 2005 when some British soldiers were coming home from, I believe it was Afghanistan.
Okay.
And Muslims, Pakistani Muslims mostly, were berating them and basically treating them a lot like you might remember soldiers returning from Vietnam were treated.
Right. Terribly.
by the hippies in the 1960s. But there was another element to it because at the same time, these were concerned people in the UK about the fact that race jihad was going on. And it seemed that nothing was being done about it. And when I say race jihad, what I mean is non-Muslim girls being lured into being traded around for sex by Muslims. This with, of course, the sanction of the Hadiths and Sirah and things like that. And so the English Defense League was formed to demonstrate peacefully, I might add, in towns where a lot of this was going on. And when Antifa reared its ugly head, they was the vanguard of being assaulted by them and Pegida, by the way. And I just want to, Melanie Collette, who's in the chat right now, and I have gone round and round and round the past 2 or 3 days about President Trump's response to Charlottesville. And I think that, she has a point. I'll say this first. Her point is good. What President Trump did not do in his very measured response, which I liked, was that he did not address ignorant and stupid people. Okay? I mean, if it had been me and someone had complained about the fact that I didn't talk about how white supremacy is bad, I would have gotten up and said, okay, let me just make this statement. White supremacy is bad. I'll also add that water is wet, the sun is hot, and pizza is awesome. Okay, in the second decade of the 21st century, any enlightened person is not going to be for race supremacy of any sort. But she was correct in that people who basically have less than an 8th grade education need to hear the words. Okay, and he didn't say those words immediately. But the other aspect of it is Americans. They're getting a fast education on this now. Americans are not as spun up on how violent and how vicious Antifa is and has been for the past several years in Europe. I mean, these are people, Mark and listeners, these are people that have no qualms about throwing rocks, bottles, used hypodermic needles at not just men and women, but at disabled people, and even at peaceful demonstrations where there are children. They don't care.
Well, Antifa threw bags of piss and shit at cops. That's the job.
Oh, yeah.
That's the motto. That's what they do.
That too, yes. I'm having a kind of a hard time hearing you, Mark, but yeah, that too. I'll probably call you back at the break, but yeah, the worst thing that we saw from Saturday, and I'm talking about Jeff and myself and Jan Rennie, who is a panelist on our program, which can be heard, by the way, at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays and Sundays on Blog Talk Radio. The worst thing was we began seeing the United States government, and I'm talking about the government, from the governor's office in Virginia all the way down, beginning to act like the Crown Prosecution Service and the police do in many of these EDL rallies, which are always peaceful. What the EDL does, Mark, is they march to a particular site where there are things like race jihad or things of that nature going on, and they'll sing, they'll chant, they'll make some speeches, and then they go home. That's what they do. No violence, nothing like that. But consistently, and it doesn't happen every time, but it happens far too often, the police are told to restrain the EDL and to make sure that they stay on specified routes, and they do not protect them when they're attacked by Antifa. In fact, they have done things like set dogs on them. And here's one that's really telling, Mark. Here's one that's really telling. You'll have a line of EDL demonstrators, okay, on one side, and you'll have a line of Antifa on the other. All right? You have police in the middle, supposedly protecting the EDL. And, of course, they come out in the press and say they're protecting the citizenry as well. Which way do you think they're facing? You would think they'd be facing towards Antifa because they're throwing rocks and all this other stuff, as you said. No, they're not only are they facing the EDL, but a lot of times they have their batons raised, ready to hit EDL demonstrators in the head. And this goes counter to policy of the Crown Prosecution Service. That, by the way, for our American friends, is kind of an Uber agency that controls all police in the UK. This is why you don't want national police, people, or nationalized police. They said if you use a baton as a law enforcement officer on a belligerent, hit their legs. Where do these guys have pictures? Have their batons raised right over their heads, ready to come down on the heads of EDL demonstrators. And in fact, this has been done several times. One wrong move is made, and they get smashed in the head, which is completely illegal, but they do it anyway, and the government looks the other way. They are often brought into situations where this is where it all came together for Jeff and for myself. Often you have the EDL march through these cordons of Antifa. They're not marched around them. Antifa is not arrested if they throw things or if they try to throw punches or whatever. The EDL is marched through them. And then they're surrounded by them. And then they have to somehow get out. And after the demonstrations are over, what do the papers say? Not arrested at evil EDL rally. Yeah, it's terrible. Oh, they're all bigots and things. But who are the 9 that are arrested? It's almost always Antifa that are arrested, because not only are they attacking the EDL, they're attacking the police.
Well, that's their goal. That's their job. That's what they do. Their job as anarchists is to do exactly that.
Yes. And I'll give you another example, because I know we're 5 minutes before the break. A good friend, a colleague of mine, I like to call her Tanya Groff, who is the head of For Freedom, which is a Pegida affiliated organization in Denmark. She is known. These people take pictures of activists over there so they can attack them. She was confronted by about 3 or 4 of these Antifa jerks, and she's very lucky. They shoved her around, and she tried to call the police, and they knocked her phone out of her hand. She's very lucky that's all that happened to her, because it can get way, way worse over in Europe. If we don't do something about this right now, Mark, and if we don't encourage President Trump to do something about this and educate the people as to the depth of the depravity and violence that Pegida will engage in, it's going to get a lot worse here in the United States, and it's going to get a lot worse really fast.
I don't disagree with that at all. Folks, we're talking to Dave Milner, who is the unpleasant blind guy. Yes, he's blind, but no, he's not unpleasant. And Dave, when we come back, now we've got about 2 minutes, 2 or 3 more minutes before the top of the hour break, and then the final hour. But I have 3 topics that I'd like to bring up, and maybe we can start talking about them now. One of them is about Angela Merkel and her coming election. Another one is about a new book that just came out called No-Go Zones. There's another article that I'd like to speak to you about Haitian refugees are saying that Canadian social benefits aren't enough, and the fact that we just discovered that 0.4% of German asylum seekers did not come from what people call safe nations. So first, tell you what, this will lead us up to the break. We got about another minute or so. Angela Merkel is now calling in Germany. Talk about people learning lessons. We talked about Donald Trump and a perfect learning point for him. Apparently, Angela Merkel has learned absolutely nothing from the past 4 years in Germany. Now, she's calling for more Muslim migrants. Not illegals, not immigrants, migrants. Now she's saying, wir schaffen das. We can do this. It's a mantra from the very beginning of her migrant crisis. She's pushing for the EU to take in 40,000 more migrants. If you wanted migrant mayhem, well, you got it in the past, and it looks to me like you're going to get it in the future. Dave, if you want to hang up and call in later, folks, we got to go to a break. It'll be about 3 minutes. We're going to be talking to Dave Milner a little bit more about that. By the way, if you had not heard, Dan Butcher went away because he's having a terrible thunderstorm in Texas right now, and he lost his damn power. All of his power went up. So it's not like he hung up. It's like everything went dark in his home. Wow. Blessings for Dave.
What I'm going to do on Thursday.
And,
all right, I'll call back, man.
And also, Jane, his wife, we also wish her a very speedy recovery. We're going to go to a break, folks, and please come right back because I've got at least four topics that are really worth discussing. Because trust me, here's the deal. What happens in Europe happens or is going to happen over here. So, folks, hang on. We're going to go to the break, and then we'll be right back. You are listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon on Tuesday, August 15th. Oh, my God, it's August already. Be right back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, it's Sean from the Sackheads Radio Show. Also one of the owners here at the SHR Media Network. Are you opinionated? Have you ever wanted to do your own show? Somebody like the Sackheads and go, yeah, I could probably do that better. Well, now's your chance. Send me a 5-minute clip at sackheadsradio@gmail.com, and maybe you can be part of the SHR broadcasting team. sackheadsradio@gmail.com.
Times are dark. The people are misled by corrupt politicians, lied to by establishment media, and deceived by the false messages of Islam. A nation looking for direction needs a guide. It needs a man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker, SHR Media, 100 Press Radio, and YouTube through the SHR Media page for a different kind of commentary on the unpleasant blind guy. Because the truth is not always pleasant.
Hey, this is Mim from Freedom Fest, the world's largest gathering of free minds. Join your friends from SHR Media at the beautiful Paris Resort in Las Vegas, Nevada, July 19th through the 22nd for 3 amazing days of liberty-oriented discussion, investment advice, and the Anthem Film Festival. It's our big 10th anniversary, featuring keynote speaker William Shatner and Freedom Fest favorites, including Steve Forbes, Jim Rogers, Lee Edwards, David Boaz, Doug Casey, Dinesh D'Souza, John Stossel, Lisa Kennedy, Grover Norquist, Peter Schiff, and many more. Don't miss out. Register at freedomfest.com for $100 off the regular registration rate when you use the all-caps code SHR Media.
Featuring right thinking from a left brain and doing the job the American maggots won't. BZ is fundamentally changing America, one diaper at a time. Just when safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, where the speech is free, but the drinks are not. The Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night, commencing at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific, where pushback is a requisite art form in and of itself. Let your ossicles be truly liberated when you listen to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, only on SHR Media Network. No ferrets were harmed in the making of this ad.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we are now in the second hour of the Saloon. And we are back. We told you we spoke earlier to Dan Butcher. We spoke to Dan about Charlottesville. Unfortunately, he had a big old ass storm that came and kind of knocked him out, literally knocked his power out. So that's why Dan's call was interrupted. We are praying for Dan to get his electrical back. In the meantime, we're speaking to Dave Milner, who's the unpleasant blind guy who actually isn't. I mean, he's blind, but he's very, very pleasant, truly. And we started talking about an article. First, Dave was talking about the EDL and how the EDL and the response to the EDL by European police, UK police, is not so terribly dissimilar by the way that local police here in the States treat Antifa, just a bit with kid gloves as opposed to some of the other. I brought up the article recently that just came up where Angela Merkel is she has the temerity to suggest that they need even more Muslim migrants. And that resulted in migrant mayhem because of Merkel's absolutely what I consider to be reckless immigration policy. But that, Dave, that hasn't fazed her. She's not taken aback from this at all. She's doubling down. What the hell, Dave?
It's amazing. It really is. Because I know you've watched her over the years, and so have I. And I think she really seemed at first to be the kind of leader that Germany needed. A good partner in the world. And she has, honestly, I don't know if she's, and I'm being serious here, I don't know if she's sold her soul to the devil or what the hell has happened with her. But she and Junkers, I don't know his first name, who is basically a junior model Hitler, are basically just turning their country, they're just turning Germany over to these migrants. And I suppose she thinks, like the Democrats do here in the States, that they will join an unholy alliance and the Democrats will stay in power forever. Of course, we know that ain't going to happen. They may join an alliance, but the Democrats, as soon as they become useless to the Muslims, will either bow to Allah or face the power and face the power they've created. As for Merkel, I see huge election fraud coming because the German people have just had it. They loathe her at this point, and I think if they hold a fair election, she's done. She's just out of there. If they hold a fair election, I don't see that happening. I think they'll do stuff that makes our voter fraud over here look like candy store kid stuff.
Dave, you may know about this. Perhaps you don't, but I bet a lot of people listening don't know this. Back in 2010, Angela Merkel said that multiculti, now that's the German term for multiculturalism, right. She said that multiculti doesn't work. Now, that was back in 2010. In between then and now, the first big question that I have to ask is, what the hell happened? I think I have an answer, but I'm curious if you, number one, if you heard that, she actually said, this is not going anywhere. And number two, with that in consideration, Dave, what the hell changed in Germany?
Well, what changed with Merkel, I think, was money and, the promise of continued power, possibly the promise of perpetual power. I mean, if she lets the Muslims continue to invade and continue to put their tentacles through Germany and turn it into a Muslim state, they'll keep her in power probably until the day she dies. That said, she will just be a figurehead at that point, and the imams, the mullahs in Germany, will be running everything. But Angela Merkel will be nice and comfortable in a nice, comfortable palace, and she'll be well cared for, and so will her adherents. And because it's one you have to understand, not just Islamic culture but Arab culture. Because they made the saying famous, they own all the clocks, we own all the time. They're willing to wait as long as it takes.
Oh, yes, they play long ball, yes.
So that's my take on it.
Here's an interesting quote. Back in February, Angela Merkel was urging Europe to take in more refugees, which is why she was ultimately very pissed at the UK for Brexit and also pissed at having to meet Donald Trump as president. And she said that Islam is, this is a quote, Islam is not the source of terror. But, see, 3 months before that, though, she did a complete U-turn in response to remember all those embarrassing electoral defeats and threats to her power? She ordered, after that now, this is interesting, she ordered EU to intercept smugglers' vessels and escort them back to North Africa. Then, if you remember, back in Christmas, that huge market jihadi attack. Then Angela Merkel said in a speech that Germany, this is another quote, what the hell, fights terrorism with compassion. And then she again stood by her migrant policy. But you, Dave, you brought up another excellent point. She, she may do another flip-flop because she's got, as you mentioned, that September 24th general election coming up. It's August 15th. That's next month. Big general election, and she's in it.
Wait a minute. Do you mean September the 15th?
Oh, she's got a September 24th big general election coming up next month.
September the 24th. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So, is she going to do another flip-flop? Can you count on her?
Oh, well, of course she'll try. And let's be clear on something for people, again, who don't know. All of the media in Germany, both public and private, have been told to toe the party line. Say nothing bad about Islam. Angela Merkel is great. Everything is fine. And, yeah, definitely keep her in office. And that's what they've been told. They've been told to do this. And so they're going to do it. Will she flip-flop? Oh, yes. She has in the past. She will this time. Absolutely she will this time. Just watch for it. Because she's very predictable.
Here's another, the staggering in the tankedness, I just invented a phrase, the staggering in the tankedness of the EU, that very, what I consider to be a controversial EU forced migrant redistribution scheme. They said their goal was to redistribute 160,000 migrants currently in Italy and Greece to other EU nations by September next month this year. As of July, just a few months ago, last month, fewer than 25,000 of them have been relocated. And yet, at the same time, Dave, what's the stance of Poland? The stance of Poland is, blimey, we're not taking any of your migrants. And so you have to ask yourself, I wonder how many Islamic terror attacks have occurred in Poland recently. Dave?
Well, and it's not just Poland. It's Hungary as well. And that answers why they're having so much trouble redistributing those people, because that's what they meant to redistribute them to the old Soviet satellite states. And those states now independent are saying no. We had it with oppression from the Soviet Union for all of these years. We've seen what these Mohammedan migrants are doing in these other countries, and we don't want it in ours. And yes, you hear about terror attacks in these countries, but you also, now this is something that most people who partake in the fake stream media here in the States don't hear about. Marches, demonstrations of tens of thousands of people against bringing in any more migrants. But you don't hear about that.
No, you
because,
don't.
Of course, our media is very compliant, like a nice little puppy.
That's exactly true. I'm going to change gears here just for a second because a new book came out. I haven't bought it yet, but I'm hearing some things about it. And the interesting point about this is, and I don't know, maybe this will be a good topic for EDL Radio on Thursday. A guy named Raheem Kassam just came out with a book called No-Go Zones. And Nigel Farage has written the foreword for that particular book. I read it, and it's incredible. I'm going to read a little bit of it because this is the best venue in which to do it. And this is written by Nigel Farage, who's a member of Parliament, member of the English Parliament. When Raheem told me he was writing this book on no-go zones in the Western world, my first reaction was, thank goodness somebody's doing this job. My second thought was, I hope he's careful. The reason for my first response is probably self-explanatory. This is an issue that is so contentious, mainly because nobody has yet documented these areas as comprehensively as Raheem does in this book. It's a topic that is marred, as you well know, Dave, it's marred with half-truths, full denials, slips of the tongue, and an attempt to reject the notion of such areas in such a brazen and unfounded manner that much of the establishment media that spends its time in denial can truly wear that title of fake news proudly. And this is Nigel Farage writing this in the foreword to the book. So he continues, he says, now I'm pleased to say they have a very good starting point by which to judge the merits of the debates on integration, assimilation, and the scale and speed of migration into the West. My second thought on the book was multifaceted. First, people who speak out against radical Islam, highlighting issues such as Sharia law, terrorism, and indeed things that shouldn't be contentious like integration, are often targeted, abused, endure massive attempts at being discredited, or even find themselves on the receiving end of threats of violence. Bingo. Stop. Just like you said, Dave, about the members of the EDL.
It goes deeper than that. For my EDL friends, and again, I'll stress this: these are not white supremacists. All right, you have people of pretty much all colors with them. But if anyone is found to be a member of that organization, sometimes you'll see them when they march, they wear masks. And this is because they're worried that they will be fired, as other people have, other EDL members have, from their jobs. They'll worry that they will lose their children. The government will take their children away because they are, quote-unquote, extremists. All right? And what did you see here already this week in the United States? You've seen people, now of course these people are race bigots, and honestly, if something bad happens to them, I'm not going to cry a bitter tear, but you've seen it begin to happen with them. And the thing is, it's not going to stop with them. It won't stop with them. It will continue with anyone and anything right of center. They will, now you can say, as I do, it's the free market, people can do what they want. Okay? But demonstration should never equal provocation. And that's what they're trying to sell over here. And it is invading and doing harm to the lives of people who just have the right to speak.
That's absolutely correct. We are lucky enough to have the Bill of Rights. We are lucky enough to have the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. People across the pond wish that they had something like that, similar to that, though it was the UK, the British themselves, that created the Magna Carta, upon which the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights were built. That said, England, the UK, the EU is a lesson, a pointed lesson in what the United States should not be doing. We're lingering about, I'd say, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years behind the UK. We're not, however, we are not learning their lesson. Now, Nigel Farage continues in his foreword of the book. In a lot of instances, in fact, the people who find themselves ghettoized and demonized from all sides are victims themselves of the community leaders, of their community leaders, and actors who want to drive a wedge between migrant communities and native populations. The work concerning poverty and socioeconomic factors is pivotal. The work of two particular movements is seminal. The work contained in the book on which Nigel Farage is commenting now on the aggravating factors, usually the establishment, the political left, is a warning sign, and he writes this, just as I said, Nigel Farage writes in the opening to this book, it's a warning sign to America to stand up, just as you said, Dave, just a minute ago, stand up and assert its identity, enforce its laws, and demand integration before it's too late for many places in the United States.
and it's getting that way in a lot of cities. I mean, you mentioned Seattle. I mean, they've got a statue of Lenin there. The entire place is a mess. You can't even. I'm gonna do a show about this. In fact, it's a show that's coming up that people will get to hear when I'm gone off the net. You can't even power wash the streets in Seattle because some idiot on the Seattle City Council said, "Well, that reminds him of films of civil rights marchers being hit with fire hoses." Now, they resolved that, but just the fact that he said it shows you just what a hot mess that place is, and they're denying and I get this from a guy in the UK, folks. They're denying their Americanism, and there's nothing wrong with Americanism. That's the identity that makes us who and what we are, a nation of people of all colors, getting together and making prosperity for ourselves. That's what those civil rights movements of the 60s were all about. Now it's about payback, and it's about destruction of the American identity. Just as you said, it's about destruction of Christianity. It's about destruction of conservatism. It's about destruction of anything that is not very far left of center, socialist or communist, and identity politics all over the place, diversity in everything but thought.
You mentioned identity politics. Oh my God, does that lead on another rant that I'm about to go on? But I think I'll wait until after this particular segment. Here's another article, though, that I'd like you to comment on, and it came out of OANN, which is One American News Network. If you're not reading, folks, OANN.com, you should. They're not slanted. I find them rather judicious in the articles that they write, and a lot of stuff they attack all sorts of things. They're not slanted or leaning in one particular arena. In other words, just politics or just any other venue. From a particular article that just came out today, it says, and here's the headline: Haitian refugees say Canadian social benefits are not enough. Just to hear that was enough to send me 210/190. And here's the article. It's very short. Thousands of refugees, mostly from Haiti, are complaining about the lack of affordable housing in Montreal. Well, isn't anybody complaining about that of, say, San Francisco? Well, yes. Haitian asylum seekers are marching into Canada across the U.S. border, fearing deportation under the Trump administration. But wait, they get a shock. Upon their arrival, they are given around $700, transit passes, and leads on local rentals. Wait, they expected more. It's Canada, after all. Despite this, they're still unable to accommodate themselves and cite a lack of housing big enough for their large families. About 2,000 illegal immigrants arrived in Canada from the U.S. this month due to the country's open-door immigration policy, which, by the way, Trudeau is reconsidering, which I find absolutely delicious. Absolutely delicious. It's Justin Trudeau crying.
There has to be a by-election close, but go ahead.
Immigrants are coming up from the United States, and we can't have that. They need to go back. It's hurting us. I feel so hurt. Suck it up, Buttercup. How'd you like to handle, Justin, how'd you like to handle thousands? How'd you like to have to assimilate? And this is a fact. 1 million new people into the United States every year for the past at least 10, 20, 30 years. How'd you like to be responsible for that, Canada?
Well, the horrible thing that they're having to go through now, and part of the reason I think he said that is because, there must be a by-election close by. They've got him until 2019. He makes sure that when these people come in, the one thing they do get is, as Kel Fritzy puts it, landed status. They'll get voting rights. Because the people of Canada are fast turning against him. He was elected. They thought he was the John Kennedy or the Barack Obama of Canada.
Yes.
He was going to be this wonderful socialist and all these things. And suddenly there are all of these uncivilized migrants from everywhere coming in and doing what uncivilized migrants do. Urinating and defecating in the streets, raping women left, right, and center, and as you said, demanding even more benefits than people get in Canada. And this is amazing to me because, again, Kel Fritzy gave me this example. And she, do look, guys, do go to Blog Talk Radio and search for Red Fox Radio. That's her program.
Oh,
her example was she had to pay close to a couple of $1,000 Canadian to have her teeth worked on. They get it for free. They get their teeth worked on for nothing. It's dragging the economy of Canada down, and the population density there is so low.
Oh God, yes.
That if they don't get rid of Trudeau, and immediately reverse this policy, that country is going to be overwhelmed. It's going to be absolutely overwhelmed. There just aren't enough people there. Huge land area, not many people, and ordinary Canadians are starting to feel the squeeze. So, all we can do really is just kind of pray for them and maybe think about a northern wall.
I like that. Hey, we're about 4 minutes away from the bottom of the hour break, and then I go to the final segment. So I want to run one more article right by you, because this is, as far as I'm concerned, it's just leftist insanity unrestrained. This is from jihadwatch.org. And folks, again, if you don't read jihadwatch.org, you're doing yourself a disservice. Here's the headline. UK journalist says she doesn't know religion of Muslim rape gangs. It's irrelevant. Kathy Newman, at Kathy Newman on Twitter. This is her tweet, many tweets asking why I referred to, quote, mostly Asian men convicted of Newcastle grooming. I don't know their religion. It's irrelevant. Stop. Dave, can you fill in just a little bit about Newcastle grooming for people that don't know what that is? And is this not a gibbering moron?
Well, okay. For those who don't know, and I researched this. I researched this for a show myself here in the United States some time back. This has to do, first of all, with the census. The U.S. Census, and I'm assuming the UK Census as well, counts Asians as people from places as far south as Afghanistan and Pakistan. Okay, so very technically speaking, when she's calling Muslims, for instance, Pakistani Muslims, Asians, very technically speaking, she's correct. But you and I and almost everyone listening, when we hear the word Asian, we think of people from Thailand, Vietnam, Japan, China.
Yes, Asia.
We think of what used to be called Asiatics. We do not think of Muslims. But they use the word Asian in the British press instead of Muslim because they don't want to say Muslim. They don't want to say Pakistani. They don't want to offend. So they call them all Asians, and I guess they really don't give a wet rat's behind whether they offend the real Asians in the UK. By saying this, she was just basically covering for the meme there. She knows exactly what she's doing.
Exactly.
And she's basically just trying to say, hey, it's no big deal. And yes, it is a big deal because we have to understand Islamic culture in order to understand what is going to happen once their population reaches a certain density here in the United States. In fact, it probably already is happening, and it's just not being reported.
I say Islam is as Islam does. I say demography is
Amen.
prophecy, because once a certain level of demography is reached, then that's when the power actually begins to transfer over to Islam. But in that, what she's doing is she's enunciating that standard dogma, that bell that everybody is supposed to accept, because of on pain of like Islamophobia charges, that these are Muslim rape gangs, but they're not acting in accord with Islamic teachings, and you know what? Their Muslim identities, that's a coinky-dink, right? That's purely incidental, isn't it, Dave?
Unless of course you go to thereligionofpeace.com, which is another great place to go, and you get this information about how these people justify doing what they do. I'm talking about Muslims and how they justify doing what they do. I suggest that place, and I also suggest the Generous Quran, which is written by Usama Dakdok, and he also has, if I'm correct, this is termed Freedom or Slavery. It's a series in several parts. They're about 15 minutes long. You can learn a lot about Islam and Islam doing what Islam does from there.
Okay, folks, we're going to have to go. It's the bottom of the hour. Dave, I want to thank you ever so kindly for being here in the Berserk Bobcat Saloon here on Tuesday. But before you go, Dave, please, again, tell folks where you can be read, where you can be found and located, and how folks can listen to you, and especially on Thursday, this coming Thursday.
All right. Well, first of all, Mark, it's been an honor and a privilege. It always is. I love talking to somebody that remembers as far back as I do. So, please check out the Unpleasant Blind Guy page at YouTube, and subscribe there, and Unpleasant Blind Guy page at Spreaker.com, and subscribe there. That's under the SHR Media page, and I'm also heard on my longer shows on the Western Free Radio Network, and I'm heard at High Plains Talk Radio with our friend Dan Butcher, praying for your family, Dan. And yes, Thursdays and Sundays at 3:30 p.m., the English Defense League radio program comes on with host Jeff Mitchell and the panelists Jan Rennie and myself. I'm going to be gone, Mark, after the EDL radio. I'm going to be a ghost until about the 3rd of September.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to go away from social media for a while and enjoy, a couple of blissful weeks away from idiots. But there will be new Unpleasant Blind Guy shows each and every week. I have prepared those for you guys, and I think you'll like them. And Mark, I really like being here with you tonight, and I appreciate you. God bless you, man. Keep on doing what you do.
Thank you, folks. Folks, we have been talking to Dave Milner, the Unpleasant Blind Guy, who is a wonderful, wonderful character, and he gave you all the places to go find him. Check out the English Defense League this Thursday, 12:30 Pacific, 3:30 Eastern, and you'll hear more buttery goodness about what the hell is going on across the pond over in the EU. This is the last segment. Come right back. I've got more stuff just from me, so don't go away. Please return.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, it's Sean from the Sackheads Radio Show, also one of the owners here at the SHR Media Network. Are you opinionated? Have you ever wanted to do your own show? Have you ever heard somebody like the Sackheads and go, yeah, I could probably do that better? Well, now's your chance. Send me a 5-minute clip at sackheadsradio@gmail.com, and maybe you can be part of the SHR broadcasting team. sackheadsradio@gmail.com.
Times are dark. The people are misled by corrupt politicians, lied to by establishment media, and deceived by the false messages of Islam. A nation looking for direction needs a guide. It needs a man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker, SHR Media, Pundit Press Radio, and YouTube through the SHR Media page for a different kind of commentary on the Unpleasant Blind Guy. Because the truth is not always pleasant.
Hey, this is Mim from Freedom Fest, the world's largest gathering of free minds. Join your friends from SHR Media at the beautiful Paris Resort in Las Vegas, Nevada, July 19th through the 22nd for 3 amazing days of liberty-oriented discussion, investment advice, and the Anthem Film Festival. It's our big 10th anniversary, featuring keynote speaker William Shatner and Freedom Fest favorites, including Steve Forbes, Jim Rogers, Lee Edwards, David Boaz, Doug Casey, Dinesh D'Souza, John Stossel, Lisa Kennedy, Grover Norquist, Peter Schiff, and many more. Don't miss out. Register at freedomfest.com for $100 off the regular registration rate when you use the all-caps code SHR Media.
Featuring right thinking from a left brain and doing the job the American maggots won't. BZ is fundamentally changing America one diaper at a time. Just when safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, where the speech is free, but the drinks are not. The Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night, commencing at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific, where pushback is a requisite art form in and of itself. Let your ossicles be truly liberated when you listen to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, only on SHR Media Network. No ferrets were harmed in the making of this ad.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Folks, I had a great time tonight. We first spoke to Dan Butcher of High Plains Pundit Media, and we just spoke with Dave Milner, the unpleasant blind guy. Dave is an expert on Islam and all things Islam, and also the UK and what's occurring across the pond these days. They're always welcome back into the saloon anytime they damn wish. And so, I don't know if Melanie's still here. Let me go over to chat and see if she's here. It says she's there, but I'm not sure. Melanie, I'd love to have you on because when we were talking about Charlottesville in chat, I'd love to have your opinion on that as well. And if I can, I'd like to make some kind of an arrangement for you to appear here because I'd like to hear what your perspective would be on that particular situation. We're going to change gears a little bit because some things have occurred recently that have flown under the weather, under the radar, so to speak. And I'd like to bring them out to the forefront. We know that our society is in the process of change, and we know that there is, well, you may not know, but I believe that there is a societal conflagration coming, and I think it's being pushed by the left. Now, the people that occurred, the incident that occurred in Charlottesville this past weekend, yes, that was pushed by folks with an agenda, a little winky agenda as opposed to those on the Antifa side. But they want to fundamentally change America. Just as Barack Hussein Obama said, the sad thing about all of that and the lackluster performance or lack thereof by the Charlottesville Police Department and the Virginia State Police, in my opinion, resulted in the unfortunate death of one woman who, again, in my opinion, did not have to die. And that's a foul, execrable situation that I don't believe had to occur. They had numerous heads up. They knew what was happening, and they failed to pay attention. And there's something else that's occurring societally in America that's people are failing to pay attention to. And that's this, that the transgender ideology is essentially the new child abuse formula. Now, I have to preface this, I should say, by stating that when I was a detective in the 90s, I worked all sorts of places. But guess what? One of the places that I did work was the Child Abuse Bureau for a 2,000-plus member department in Northern California. While I was there, I saw all sorts of things that are heinous, so I know what it is that child abuse does to adults and what it does to children. And this ideology is being spread with absolute wild abandon by leftists nationally and globally. And again, it's purposeful. There is a purpose to all of this. You guys know that I like to listen to Tucker Carlson, and he had a guest on his show about a week ago that sums this up wonderfully. He interviewed a person by the name of Dr. Michelle Cretella. And she's president of the American College of Pediatricians. This is not a small thing. This is a large organized college of doctors who consult on all things involving children. So we got to establish sort of a baseline for this post. It's madness. If you go to my blog, you can see that there's an article by Dr. Cretella there. But if you want to hear, and for the rest of the show, you're going to hear about it. Let's listen to what Tucker Carlson is talking about with Dr. Cretella, if we can. I'll wager you may not have heard this before.
Pediatricians, she just wrote a piece in which she says, we're quoting now, transgender ideology has infiltrated my field and produced large-scale child abuse. Cretella says doctors are encouraging parents to have their kids change genders when there's no evidence these changes are safe or even helpful.
Are you kidding me? No, folks, I'm not. It's right under our noses. I've seen it for years. Open your eyes and your ears. Listen and watch.
Dr. Cretella joins us now. Doctor, thanks a lot for weighing in on this. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is this is a field, I'm not sure what it is, of social science or medicine that is changing so fast that it's hard to sort of know where we are exactly. And you're in the practice of providing medicine to kids, so I wanted to get your perspective on it. What are you seeing?
Thank you very much, Tucker. I'm glad to be here. I think it's important to say that everyone on both sides of this issue is concerned about finding loving and healthful solutions for all children.
Right. Yeah.
Honestly, we at the American College of Pediatricians, and also I have many colleagues on the left, also insist that those solutions be rooted in reality, and transgender ideology is not. Sex is hardwired from before birth, and it cannot change.
Stop. She's going to leftist hell. Did you just hear what she said? She said sex is hardwired from birth. There are entire segments of society who would disagree with her, and if she were alone in a room with them, they would very likely assault her physically. How do you deal with mindsets like that?
And that's why we've actually called this child abuse, because by feeding children and families these lies, children are having their normal psychological development interrupted.
But wait until you hear how their development is being interrupted.
They're being put on the puberty blockers, which essentially castrates them chemically.
Puberty blockers, which castrate children chemically.
Followed by surgical mutilation later on.
Followed by surgical mutilation later on.
This is child abuse. It's not health care.
So as you know...
This is America. This is the United States. This, ladies and gentlemen, is happening before your very eyes. Now you know, and you need to be outraged.
You will be, if you haven't already, be accused of committing child abuse yourself and of being cruel and unloving and not caring for these kids, of imposing a medieval theology on modern children. How do you respond?
Right, but as you said at the beginning, this is about science. What is going on now with the puberty blockers, followed by cross-sex hormones, followed by surgeries, has absolutely no track record whatsoever. The loving solution for children who are ages 3 to 10.
Are you kidding me? There are parents who want to start the transition at age 3. Can you conjure that?
They engage in magical thinking. They don't know the difference so easily between fantasy and reality. We need to nurture them through adolescence, through natural puberty. Our job as parents and physicians is to help children embrace their healthy bodies. And when this is done, once they get past puberty into late adolescence, as many as 95% will come to embrace their bodies and identify with their biological sex.
95%. Children, people. These are children. And leftists, oh, not people on the right, guaranteed, leftists are doing this to their own children.
So I mean, since this is not just something we're debating as college students, but there are physicians involved who are prescribing drugs, what do we know about the effects of heavy-duty hormones, synthetic hormones given to little kids, like long-term?
Right. Well, we don't have long-term studies, which is a major problem, which is why physicians should not be telling parents that this is settled science and that it is safe. We do know that when puberty blockers are used appropriately in other settings, that we have observed in adults. For example, they can be used to treat prostate cancer and some gynecologic issues in women, that there's evidence that you can impact memory and cognitive ability in a negative way. And as far as the cross-sex hormones, if you have a young child on puberty blockers who goes directly to cross-sex or sex change hormones, they become sterile. You're sterilizing children. They can't.
We're sterilizing children. In the name of an ideology, we're sterilizing children. When did healthcare become essentially another iteration of child rape like NAMBLA, only this time endorsed by doctors and social workers? When did that happen? What kind of insanity is this? And what kind of unhinged people recommend such things?
Possibly, little children cannot possibly understand the risk of having a medication and then never being able to have children in the future.
So I didn't know that. There's a lot I don't know about this. Again, this has all happened so fast. I don't think most people really know what's going on. But what's the youngest age at which kids are getting these kind of drugs?
I hope you're sitting down.
The guidelines suggest that puberty blockers be given at ages 11 to 12, but I've had reports from colleagues across the country, and you can also find them in various news reports, that children as young as 9 have been put on these puberty blockers. And what it does, it arrests normal development. Puberty is not a disease. You know, you're stopping them. It's not just a matter of sex characteristics. You're arresting brain development.
There's a lot there. Dr. Catella, thanks a lot for that report. I appreciate it.
When did this kind of insanity occur? The answer is it occurred when leftists took charge of various facets of society and education unimpeded, absolutely unimpeded, due to rampant fear, and abject cringing by gaups, guilty, overeducated white people. Children, you heard her say, children 3 to 10 engage in magical thinking. They have no concept about, I want to be a boy today, I want to be a girl tomorrow. Think about that for a second. Let that sink in. Then you bring in that leftist ideology. So what they want to do is they want to do two things: remove childhood and allow children to make these kinds of decisions. She said puberty is not a disease. But here's an article that I wrote from 2013. Even back then, and these people were proud of it. The article, the headline is, this is, of course, from Fornicalia, and guess what? The Bay Area, San Francisco. The little boy who started a sex change, age 8, because he and his lesbian parents knew he always wanted to be a girl. Really. This, ladies and gentlemen, is absolute insanity writ large. And with the bulk of drugged and greedy and insouciant free cheese gatherers in the United States, no one seems to care because, as per normal, the American media maggots refuse to cover this story. I found this story on UK media. UK media is where I had to locate this story, but it takes place here in the United States, in Fornicalia, in the Bay Area. From the UK Daily Mail, the lesbian parents of an 11-year-old boy who was undergoing the process of becoming a girl last night defended the decision, claiming, now this is back in 2013, claiming it was better for a child to have a sex change when young. Thomas Lobel, who now calls himself Tammy, is undergoing controversial hormone-blocking treatment in Berkeley, California, to stop him growing through puberty as a boy. We heard it from the doctor, puberty blockers. But Pauline Marino and Deborah Lobel warn that children with gender identity disorder forced to postpone transitioning could face a higher risk of suicide. Because an 11-year-old is so much in touch with themselves, right, and they're clearly recognized, they're able to recognize at that age what they wish to be and what they want to do in their future. But if that was unhinged, listen to this. Those two mothers said that one of the first things Thomas told them when he learned sign language at age 3 because of a speech impediment was, "I am a girl." You're going to allow a 3-year-old to dictate to you, adults, parents, what you're going to do with this child. A child is telling you, you wouldn't give that the first consideration unless you had an agenda. And it's two lesbians raising a little boy, and they wish they'd had a girl instead. There, I'd said it. I fully, completely believe that. So guess what? The lesbians decided that they wanted to feed that fire, okay? They stoked it day and night. They didn't want the boy, they wanted the girl. It was a cold and calculating maneuver conducted for their benefit, not that of the child. It was, as I'm wont to coldly but logically call it, that is nothing more than a mind fuck of a child. This is exactly what child abusers do. I fought them in the 90s. It's exactly what they do. They take advantage of their adult brains over the undeveloped brains of children. Their mastery of language and their twisted crafting of their version of the truth. Puberty blockers. That's what you need, puberty blockers. San Francisco, right by Berkeley, is one of 4 cities in the United States with a hospital that has a program for transgender children. Of course, you're not shocked about that. The University of California, San Francisco is home to the Center of Excellence. The Center of Excellence for Transgender Health. Why, of course, why wouldn't it be there? The Center for Pile Driving the Impressionable and Malleable Brains of Infants and Children, or CPIMBIC, okay? In April of 2016, I wrote about the results of all of this insanity. Just let the absolutely rampant, dangerous sexual lunacy about kids commence. This happens to be from the HoustonChronicle.com, because this is where it's going already. It's already going there. Headline is from the Houston Chronicle. Complaint. Katy area teacher, now that's a location that's in Texas. Katy area teacher fired for refusing to address girl 6 as transgender boy. What the fuck? An educator this week filed a federal discrimination complaint against a learning center in Katy, Texas, alleging that she was wrongly fired for refusing to address a 6-year-old girl as a transgender boy, the teacher's attorney said Tuesday. Madeline Kirksey, a former employee of the Children's Lighthouse Learning Center on Clay Road in Katy, was fired November 3rd after she would not agree to treat the child as a male and called the child by a new male name, according to a copy of a filing with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission provided by her attorneys. But wait, oh wait, you haven't heard half of the story yet, have you? No, because I always say, you know what BZ says. BZ says, but wait, there's more. Using fake names, Taylor said that the child left school Friday as Sally and returned on Monday going by Johnny. Quote, they had a real issue on their hands, Taylor said of the school staff. The child reportedly showed up on Monday with a short haircut, and Taylor said the child's gender identity wasn't set in stone. He said the child continued to use the girl's bathroom. The 6-year-old also played football with the boys, and when hit hard, cried and said, I'm really not a little boy. Then, as now, here's the point that leftists purposely fail to even hear or consider at all, which thrusts the issue directly into the realm of child abuse. The attorney said Taylor likened the imposition of such a decision over gender on a child as child abuse, just as the doctor said. At such a young age, he said, children haven't even decided what ice cream or cereal they prefer. Yeah, my point, precisely. Children are no more equipped to make these decisions than are Mexican water rats or centipedes, okay? Much less adults. So, here's an interesting article that I found from the UK Mirror because it involves an adult. Britain's youngest sex swap patient reveals why she's undergoing surgery to switch gender for the third time. Rhea Cooper was born a boy because the UK's youngest sex swap patient at 15, but transitioned back to being a man at the age of 18. Like many young women, Rhea Cooper dreams of one day getting married and having children, but the 23-year-old knows the odds are stacked against her, not only because she was born a boy, but because she's now switched gender an astonishing 3 times in her short life. Gosh, do you wonder, did she have parents like that? Did she? I think you know the answer. Rhea, who was born Brad, became Britain's youngest sex swap patient at 15. Doctors controversially backed her belief that she was a girl in a boy's body. She was given blockers, puberty blockers, drugs, to stop her going through puberty, followed by injections of female hormones to impede face and chest hair and trigger the formation of breasts. Puberty blockers. But with her life spiraling out of control as she struggled with her new identity and the fears of never being accepted as a woman, Rhea decided to transition back and live her life instead as a gay man. Before having crucial surgery, she ended her treatment and became Brad again, soon after her 18th birthday. It turned her into the unwitting poster boy for those who claimed teenagers were too young to be given gender reassignment. Wow. Consider me gobsmacked, okay? Imagine that. I didn't see that one coming at all, did you? But 5 years on, Rhea is more certain than ever that's not really her. And it's making her second attempt at becoming a woman to have the future she always dreamed of. She said, I've always known I was a female. It was everyone else who was confused, not me. I was wearing makeup and heels at the age of 12. There was no question. But I felt under so much pressure from society that 6 years later I caved in. I was torn. I knew exactly who I was, but I also wanted to conform and be normal. Yeah, because after all, children display only the finest decision-making capabilities in any event at all times, starting at the age of 3, as you well know, or starting at the age of 8, because when a child tells you something at the age of 3, folks, you need to listen. Pay attention. Yeah. Then you have to do what I call the logical extension. Guess what? There are now transgender summer camps. Ooh, can't wait. From gatewaypundit.com. Transgender Summer Camp offers programs for children as young as 4 years old. Wouldn't you want to take your 4-year-old to a transgender summer camp? Woohoo. Rainbow Day Camp is a summer camp for transgender and gender-fluid children that is accepting children as young as 4 years old. And enrollment is booming. And some people think that isn't child abuse. And again, I go back. This is America. This is the United States. This is your country right here, right now. That was tough. That was tough to speak. That was tough to say, and it was tough to listen to. But it's time to go in any event because, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, thanks for listening. I have to tell you thanks for listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon right here on the SHR Media Network and also on the High Plains Pundit Network. Hey, guess what? You want to contact me? I have an email now, bz@shrmedia.com. You can also find me on my blog at bloviatingzeppelin.net. My original music at the beginning is by Possessed Tranquility, and promotional consideration is by Lockheed Martin Skunk Works and the Boeing Company. If it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. And of course, as everyone knows by now, my tiaras are by My Little Pony. Thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team, or in lieu of them, Stoli. So, okay, thanks ever so kindly for listening, for being in chat. Lots of people in the chat room tonight. Thanks to Dan Butcher. Thanks to Dave Milner. Thank you for being here. God bless. Take care. Be safe.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night.
Good night, Jim Bob. Go to sleep.
Good night, and good luck.